Wendy Truscott has enjoyed the wonders of Muskoka for almost 70 years as an early cottager and now a resident. Its history inspired her setting for her first novel, Haunted Journey, a copy of which can be found in several local libraries. She has recently completed its sequel, Shattered, which she hopes to publish soon. Along the way, Wendy has also been working on an untitled romance thriller, which is set primarily in Toronto, but also has a connection to Muskoka. Tonight, she will read from its first chapter. Dana Williams is a part-time yoga teacher and aspiring playwright. She is enjoying the excitement of her first play, going into rehearsals with an amateur theater group. Heartbroken by the end of a relationship, she has recently moved to another part of the city. What a gruesome event happens, Dana wonders. Is it a prank, or am I losing my mind?
On what was meant to be the most important day of her life, Dana Williams woke to find a dead body in her bed. A body with a dainty black bow tied around its throat, like a macabre necklace. Dana's first reaction was to scream bloody murder, and she did as she leaped from the bed. Her second was that she must still be asleep, and this was one of her super-real nightmares. It wasn't. This cold, stiff corpse still lay there, teeth bared in a sick half-smile. At that moment, the fact that it was the body of a rat and not a human being gave her little comfort. If its purpose was to terrorize her, it was certainly succeeding. Dana couldn't take her eyes off the obscene thing as she scurried to the furthest corner of her tiny bedroom and slumped to the floor. She managed to tuck her long limbs in close to her chest and curl herself into the tightest position possible in the awkward space between dresser and wall. A part of her was still slightly disoriented in that halfway place between sleeping and waking. Little mewing sounds squeezed out of her mouth, but she felt separate from them, as if they were coming from some other badly frightened person. God, how that thing get in here? Someone had to have been in the apartment. Then a more terrifying thought, they might still be here. She tried listening for signs of another presence, but her heart thudded so loudly she wouldn't have heard a brass band. What kind of a sicko would do something like that, and why? God, why? She shrunk even further into the corner as if willing herself to be invisible and tried to calm her body and mind with deep yogic breaths. At least from her vantage point here, she could no longer see the hideous thing stretched out on her beautiful new floral sheets. A sudden urgent knocking on her apartment door broke through her thoughts. Reacting automatically, Dana unfolded from her fetal position and stumbled into the living room, scurrying across it to open the door. Then she halted, realizing she had no idea who might be out there. Her shaky voice was almost unrecognizable as it called, "Who's there?" "Dana? Dana? It's Mrs. MacIver. Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. MacIver. Dana was so grateful to hear her landlady's voice that she yanked open the door and almost threw herself into the sweet woman's arms. Except Mrs. MacIver wasn't alone. A tall, brooding man stood behind her, his dark scowl and stiff stance exuding tension, even anger. "Dana, what's wrong? I heard screaming. You're shaking, my dear. What's happened?" Mrs. MacIver's usually calm eyes were worried. The man stared at Dana and her discomfort increased. Not only was she in her briefest pajamas, but something about him unnerved her and she couldn't speak. She noted Mrs. MacIver's smart pantsuit and the stylish new cut of her blonde bobbed hair. Part of her wondered if the still attractive widow had acquired a boyfriend. Then she dismissed the idea as both unlikely and none of her business. Still, to see a strange man in the house at this hour of the morning and in the company of Mrs. MacIver was most unusual. For a moment she considered not explaining what had happened, suddenly absurdly afraid of looking foolish. She could make up a plausible explanation, a particularly vivid nightmare perhaps. At the same time, she simply could not go back into the bedroom and face that thing alone. After all, she admonished herself, there was nothing for her to feel foolish about. She decided it was a horrible joke someone had tried to pull on her, that's all. An hysterical sense of black humor overtook her, and she heard herself say, "I just found a present, Mrs. MacIver." "A present? A present made you scream like that?" The poor woman looked confused, and the man glared. And no wonder, Dana thought, I'm confused myself. She gave her head a shake as if to clear it. "Yes," she continued, "it's a big, fat rat. I didn't think there were any in this house, but I certainly found one." Her landlady recoiled at the very idea, bristling at the implied insult. "No, dear, we've never had rats in this house, never. Absolutely not. It's probably just a big mouse." In a cheap-charge manner, she added, "Let's have a look, shall we? Where did you see it? Maybe it found a way in from outside. It only takes the tiniest opening for them to squeeze through, you know." She started to enter the apartment. The stranger remained standing in the hallway, but reached out as if to put a restraining hand on her arm. Dana was adamant. "Oh no, it's a rat all right, and it even came gift-wrapped, tied with a bow." Shivering, she wrapped her arms around herself. She was beginning to feel giddy and fought an urge to giggle. This must be shock, she thought. Mrs. MacIver gave her a nod, assessing look. "Gift-wrapped?" Noticing Dana's discomfort, she put an arm around her and said, "You need a sweater or a throw to wrap around yourself." Then, as if suddenly remembering she hadn't arrived alone, she turned and said, "Philip, do you think you could give us a hand with this mouse?" To Dana, she explained, "This is my nephew, Philip. We were just getting ready to go out for breakfast when you screamed. I'm sure he'll be able to take care of this for us, dear. Now, where did you see this mouse? We might need to set a trap." Dana grabbed a knitted afghan off her shoulder and wrapped herself tightly in it, and not just because she was shivering. She gave the nephew a wary look and silent appraisal. His deeply tanned and slightly lined face still bore an angry expression, accented by the jut of a strong chin. Yet there was concern in his tired-looking eyes, and it was for his aunt. His lean frame was casually dressed in what she thought must be travel clothes, one of those vests full of handy pockets, and light cotton slacks full of creases. She was aware of being assessed in return, and could read the obvious conclusion in his intense gaze. She was not to be trusted. "Dana," Mrs. MacIver interrupted her thoughts, "where's the mouse, dear?" Without another word of explanation, she led the two to her bedroom. Standing aside at the doorway, she ushered them in ahead of her. Not wanting to advance further into the room herself, she mutely pointed at the bed and closed her eyes.